Good evening, and welcome to the September 26th meeting of the Jefferson Board of Education here at Norton Commons Elementary. Thank you everyone for being here, and especially our students. I know we're going to have a really great meeting, and are these on-site or off-site meetings, depending on your point of view. Meetings are always really wonderful and special because they to give us an opportunity to be out in the public, but also for the public to see some of the great, fantastic things that happen every single day in our classrooms. So I want to appreciate all of your all's time and energy and effort to be here this evening, to be able to see not just our board meeting, but the wonderful kids that are about to perform in front of you. Prior to this meeting, the Board of Education held a work session regarding the new accountability system, and no action was taken. First item on our agenda is our traditional moment of silence, so please join us for that moment. Thank you. Now, if you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by District 3 elementary students over here to my left, your right. Thank you very much. At this time, we would ask that also some of our students from District 3 middle schools read our vision statement.
All Jefferson County public school students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse shared world.
Thank you very much. You know, there are 7 school board members for Jefferson County, which is we're an outlier within the rest of the state. Normally there are 5 school board members for each school district, and we have 7. And that allows us, because we're such a large district. So that also means we have every opportunity, we get these different opportunities to be able to go to these different parts of town. And today we are in board member Steph Horn's district. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Member Horn to be able to bring greetings. Member Horn?
Wanted to welcome everybody to District 3. I'm going to steal something from Dr. Polio and say that I love my job as a board member. I'm really, really good at it. And I'm a champion for children, not only in District 3, but all over the county. And that's what I do as a board member. I focus on the kids. I am so grateful to be here at Norton Commons Elementary with our principal, Allison. And you know, it's Allison spelled with a Y. Having this public-private partnership with the YMCA and JCPS is just an incredible situation. I hope we can do this other places around the county. But thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you, Member Horn. And Allison Vitito, our principal here and our host, and thank you for hosting us here at Norton Commons Elementary, home of the Knights. It will now come forward and give us a brief welcome and overview. Thank you.
Chair Brady, Superintendent Polio, Jefferson County Board of Education members, and distinguished guests and visitors. Welcome to Norton Commons Elementary, the newest school within Jefferson County Public Schools. We are in our 2nd year of operation as a school, and we couldn't be more proud of the community that we've built, including our partnership with the Y, our partnership with Norton Commons Community, and other community agencies within this area. Instead of me talking about my school and how wonderful it is, our children each day say a pledge that I think personifies what we are about at Norton Commons Elementary. So in front of you, you do have a copy of the pledge. I would love for you to read along with us, and I'm going to invite two of my students to come up and read with us as well as we recite the Norton Commons Elementary School Pledge. And again, this is my welcome to you and my nod to you as far as what our values, mission, and vision are here at Norton Commons Elementary. We are Norton Commons. We believe in building positive relationships, using kind and helpful words, working hard to do our best, keeping our schools safe and clean, celebrating differences, working together, being grateful for what we are given, and accepting responsibility for ourselves and our school community. We are Norton Commons. Welcome to the kingdom.
Thank you. Now it's time for our recognitions and resolutions. Ms. Terry Robinson will guide us through this process. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Dr. Polio, Board Chair Chris Brady, and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this evening we have the honor of recognizing and receiving student demonstrations from Board District 3 students and staff. We begin with Norton Commons Elementary students, Chaz Stollard and Kruthi Mangamar, who will share information about their school's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics learning, as well as their student technology leadership program. Students, please come forward to begin your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chaz Thaler. I'm in 5th grade and in STEAM Club at Norton Common Elementary. This summer, I went to STRP camp with my teacher and 3 other kids. I learned a lot of things, but my favorite was PSAs. A PSA is a public service announcement, and we made our movie based on why it's bad to litter. I have a little brother and sister in 1st grade, and they love STEAM too. They have done Lego robotics and like all the technology that we get to use. My favorite thing in STEAM last year was the film festival. The film festival is when groups had to make a movie based on an important time in history. My group did Lewis and Clark. We even won the award for best movies when the school voted. This year, we are going to try to make it to STLP regionals by hosting an NCES STEAM night. At our STEAM night, there will be different stations to show the cool things we learn about in STEAM. I'm happy to be a part of STLP and STEAM Club at Norton Commons Elementary. Thank you. Now introducing Kruthi.
Good evening. My name is Kruthi. I'm in 5th grade. I am in band and Vex Robotics. I want to talk for a second about our partnership with the Norton Commons YMCA. This YMCA collaboration is the best in the nation. For example, 2nd graders get to go during the school day to do swim lessons. Another great example is Mr. Logan. Logan helps with funding and coaching several things including Vex Robotics, cross country, and much more. In last year's Vex IQ Challenge in Louisville, we had to bounce our robot on a bridge and get points by knocking Vex balls. I was nervous to drive our robot, but it turns out that it was fun. We placed in several competitions and learned a lot. So in conclusion, Norton Commons has a great partnership with the YMCA, and thanks to that, we're able to have some really cool opportunities to work and learn together.
Dr. Polio, Board Member Stephanie Horn, and Assistant Superintendent Joe Lefford, please come forward to thank the students for their presentation. Joining in the recognition is their principal, Allison Vitito. If you'll please come forward for a photograph. Next, we have Norton Elementary students, Sydney Jones and Brady Jenkins, will share information about the study of their science fair projects and what they have learned. Students, please come forward.
Hello, I am Brady Jenkins. I'm a fifth grader at Norton Elementary School in Miss Fishburne's class. This is my fourth grade science fair project. It's a pea cell. The scientific question is, which potato produces the highest electric output? I got the idea for my science fair project from Dive the Wimpy Kid, book 10, where a picture is shown of a radio being powered by a potato. My hypothesis is that the red potato will produce the most electric output. Our body gets energy from starches, and the color white is often evidence of starch. The red potato, it is noticeably whiter than the other potato varieties, so I expect the starches in the red potato will produce a greater electric output. In conclusion, the red potato had the most electric output. My hypothesis that the whiter the potato, the more electric output a potato produced was incorrect. Each different type of potato had a different amount of electric output, regardless of the color of the interior of the potato.
Hi, my name is Sydney Jones. I am a fifth grader in Miss Stapler's class, and I go to Norton Elementary School. And the title of my science fair project is Plant Health Hazards. And my question was, which liquid will affect plant growth negatively the most? So basically what it's about is, yes, pollution's bad, that's accurate, but what about household objects? How would those affect plants in the environment? So the different liquids that I used were rubbing alcohol, white vinegar, canola oil, and water, and we tested them on radish plants. I thought that the alcohol would affect it the most, and the results were the vinegar and the rubbing alcohol did the worst, and both of the plants were shriveled. They were drooping and they were brown. So in conclusion, both vinegar and rubbing alcohol do the worst of growing to plants out of canola oil, rubbing alcohol, white vinegar, and water.
Dr. Polio, Board Member Stephanie Horn, and Assistant Superintendent Joe Lefford, please come forward to thank the students for their presentation. Joining in the recognition is Acting Principal Tim Hagan. We are excited to hear a vocal performance from Wilder Elementary School students and staff. They will sing Just Be Happy by Pink Zebra. Students and staff, please come forward. Dr. Polio, Board Member Stephanie Horn, and Assistant Superintendent Joe Lefford, please come forward to thank the Wilder Elementary students and staff for their outstanding performance. Joining in the recognition is music teacher Linda Wooten and Principal Bill Perkins. Thank you. Family, we have the pleasure of hearing from the Westport Middle School Rockin' Warhawks Electric Orchestra, who will play the song Believer by Imagine Dragons. Students, please come forward to begin your presentation. Dr. Polio, Board Member Stephanie Horn, and Assistant Superintendent Joe Lefford, please come forward to thank the students for their excellent musical presentation. Joining the recognition is Orchestra Director Corey Zillich and Principal Jody Zeller. At this time, I would like to ask all District 3 parents and family members to please stand and be recognized. District 3 parents, please stand and be recognized. Please join me in viewing a video presentation of District 3 schools.
Steph Horn. I'm the board member from District 3. I love my job. I am very, very good at it. The schools in District 3 are fabulous. Welcome to District 3.
The best thing about Chansey is how the teachers encourage their students to do their best, and they have different ways and strategies to make them feel like they are doing their best.
Teaching and learning, that is the center and the core of everything we do at Dunn Elementary.
What does that mean?
We have our kids college and career ready. We talk about college. Each kid in the school has a t-shirt, kindergarten through 5th grade, that shows what year they're going to graduate.
I think it's important to learn about other cultures because it helps me know whenever I go and find somebody who speaks a different language or has a different culture, that I can still be friends with them.
Our top priority and one thing that I love about Lowe is our school culture. So we focus on positive culture for our kids, adults, community within the school. It goes right along with Vision 2020 for the district.
Technology is important at Middletown Elementary. We offer lots of opportunities for students to stay connected and build on their 21st century skills.
The best thing about Norton Commons is the teachers because they're outgoing.
I like the school because the people here, there are teachers that take time out of their busy schedule.
We prepare our students through a rigorous curriculum that challenges them and also teaches them responsible behavior that carries them forward. Our overall goal is to guide all students to their full potential.
CT has really prepared me for middle school because I get programs that I really like, and those programs can also help me understand other things that I don't understand better, and the teachers really help me with that.
Ready, brass flute?
Crosby Middle School is a great place to learn. It's a school where there's just lots of opportunities for students, both academically and outside of school. The kids are very excited. One of the things that I constantly talk to the students about, be ready to be engaged.
At Cameron Middle School, we focus on the whole child.
I really like all the respect that I feel like the students give the teachers. And I like the style of teaching. Like, they don't just give you a piece of paper and tell you to do it. They actually show you.
Dancing Room is a 6-hour marathon with games and, of course, dancing. All of the money raised goes to pediatric oncology. This year, a record $61,000 was raised, all for the kids.
I feel like Eastern is preparing me in a lot of ways, especially for college. The work that they give you, the test that they give you, you have to study for. If I have a big exam coming up, I already know how to do that.
We keep our lights on 24/7. When you're in the business of serving children in need, you have to. It's important we run as efficiently as possible.
Spiritus has made a kitchen upstairs available to us, and we have had a couple of experiments in the kitchen already. They get excited, but every single one of them is eager.
Dr. Polio and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And thank you to all the staff, parents, and students who came out here to make this night extra special. Quickly, before we go to our next item, is there a vote or is there a motion to receive our recognitions? Motion made by Member Gies. Is there a second? Second made by Member Horn. All those in favor? Motion passes. We have received our recognitions and resolutions. At this time, as it is traditionally our custom, we invite all students who might have homework or other studying they might need to do to please, you can feel free to leave. We'll take a 2-minute recess. And we again, thank you everyone for coming out. I will guarantee that the rest of our agenda will not be quite as entertaining. All right, we'll get back to the matter at hand, business at hand. So thank you for those of you who are remaining with us. At this time, it's time to move on to our next agenda item, which is a recommendation for approval of the meeting agenda. I will remind everyone that we are at a special meeting because of the change in location that we originally had scheduled, so therefore there are no changes are allowed. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda? So moved by Member Horn, seconded by Member Kolb. All in favor? Motion passes? Okay, just want to make sure everyone's there. I failed to mention at the top of our meeting that Member Duncan is unable to meet with us today or be here with us this evening. She has a matter that she's attending to, so just wanted to, it was her desire to be able to be here, but unfortunately it was not possible. All right, is there a recommendation for approval of the minutes of our previous meeting? And this is from September 12th. Motion made by Member Horn. Is there a second? Second made by Member Kolb. All those in favor? Motion passes. At this time, it's time to have Dr. Polio's superintendent report. So, Dr. Polio?
Thank you, Chair Brady, board members. There's nothing like being the speaker after the room empties out. So what's left are people who have to be here and a few others. So excited to bring today's superintendent report to the board. Last Friday, we concluded the first 6 weeks of the school year, so a sixth of the way through the school year. Flying by. First of all, I want to thank Allison Vidito. She's still here from Norton Commons, who is hosting us today. Showed us a great tour of the school earlier, and then obviously got some great exhibition of student work, and all of our District 3 schools for great work that they're exhibiting to us tonight. So thank you and congratulations to all those students. As we know, as I have every report, we're going to focus in tonight on improving climate and culture, increasing student learning, and improving organizational coherence. Had the opportunity to speak to Focus Louisville, a part of Leadership Louisville, last week. After my part of speaking to them, each of the groups went out to a different school. I believe they went to Olmsted North, Goldsmith Elementary, and Seneca High School. And I was interested to see in the principal presentations if each of the presentation would include those three areas. Reports back to me that each of the principal did have those areas included as areas for growth. So we know we're cooking with gas when they start talking about it when we haven't coached them up at all. So at least we're having across the board, I believe, 155 schools that are identifying our three priority areas and moving forward on them. So this evening, I wanted to touch on each one briefly as I have in prior meetings. Improving climate and culture, a couple things I wanted to touch on. First of all, as I reported at our last board meeting, in the coming mini break that we have coming up with our PD Day, a Gold Day, and Parent-Teacher Conference, we will be rolling out our mini comprehensive school survey, which will give us a quarterly check-in on climate and culture. We will be surveying in this one all of our certified and classified staff. It'll be 13 questions that really helps us take a look at climate and culture. We are adding a piece to this, one that is important information for us. I've always wanted to give teachers and staff members the opportunity to let us know if there's any barriers for them being successful in their job. So we will have an open response question on the mini comprehensive survey where teachers and classified staff can weigh in on barriers that we might have, and I know we'll probably get a wide range of things. We're looking specifically for things that might be needs in their classroom or in their workplace to make sure that they're successful. We'll be looking for themes within schools and across schools that will give us some information so that we can respond and make sure that we are being successful at meeting the needs of our employees. We're going to report back that data, any themes we get from that, and our culture and climate survey response to the board. Hopefully we'll have that data at the October 24th board meeting is what we want. If we don't have it by then, it'll be in our first one in November, but we want to report that data out. So that's an important part of us monitoring ourselves for improving climate and culture. Second of all, a big part of culture is making sure that we have parent engagement. Tonight on the agenda, we are approving our lease for the California Community Center Satellite Central Office facility. We're excited about moving forward on that. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that we get that up and rolling, but we will have all offices that touch parents will be able to access that. We're going to have computer labs with staff members on certain days to come in where parents can come in the community center, access their student grades, attendance, contact teachers. And finally, we'll have a meeting room in the California Community Center where our schools can access that space to have parent meetings and parent-teacher conferences, open houses, those type of things in that facility. So we're excited to move forward on that and bring our central office to our community in West Louisville. I want to thank John Marshall and his office for working hard to make sure that that becomes a reality, as we talked about that about 6 weeks ago, and we're moving forward on it. Secondly, with increased student learning, and this has a lot, I believe, to also organizational coherence. We heard, I think my first board meeting that I came on in June, there was a long discussion about whether we were funding deeper learning at the appropriate levels, and that it was a main part of Vision 2020, and we didn't know if we had the funding to show that that was a main component of our Vision 2020. And after being in so many schools, I think I'm up to about 40 schools I've been at, so closing in on about, I'd say about a little better than a fourth of our schools so far in 6 weeks. But I see so many great things happening in schools embracing deeper learning. But many times we go in and schools tell us if we only had this or we only had access to that, we could take it even farther. So we are beginning a process where we are going to have a substantial pool of grant funds for internal, and I say grant, it will be internal general fund monies that schools will have a process, we're just beginning this, where schools can apply for internal grants that must be related to deeper learning. So examples would be Chromebooks. We've had a lot of schools want to increase their technology for deeper learning. They've asked us for Chromebooks. We want to give the potential for schools to access that. But we want to make sure it's tied to our deeper learning initiative. So we're going to roll that out. We'll report back to you within the next 6 to 8 weeks. We want to make those funds accessible to schools. But once again, we want to make sure they're tied to moving deeper learning forward. We'll let you know how those grants, who they're going to and what they're for as we move forward, so schools can move forward on deeper learning initiatives. And we can meet the needs of what you talked about in June. I believe it was May or June, about making sure that we fund deeper learning appropriately. Finally, with improving organizational coherence, we have a couple of new positions on tonight's agenda that we're asking for your approval. They are both positions that we think will move our work forward. First one is Director of School Choice. We have a lot of work coming forward to us when it comes to authorizing charters and the work that will come forward with that. This person will become an expert in charter school regulation. Will train the board, report back to the board. We could have some other initiatives involved with this position with school choice, but initially it will be involved in making sure they're an expert on charter schools. Second position we're asking for approval is the Diversity Hiring Specialist, which will be inside of our Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Office. This will be a position that will help monitor to make sure that equity is included in every hiring position, and that we are moving forward with initiatives to make sure that we have diversity within our teaching ranks and our administrative ranks in central office. And so we want to make sure that we have someone doing that 24/7, as it has been a common theme from our board, from you all, when talking to us about making sure that we have initiatives that move that forward. This person is going to do that, and we're going to make sure that happens. So each and every board meeting, it's my goal that we move forward in each of these 3 initiatives. I know we have staff that works on that every single day in central office, and making sure our schools are improving climate and culture, increasing student learning, and improving organizational coherence. That concludes the superintendent report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Yes, discussion?
Can I ask a question about the grant process? Is this inside the budget process? Can you explain that just a little bit more? I'm trying to wrap my mind around that.
So yes, we're going to be accessing some 17-18 funds, and so we are just beginning the exploration process. We'll report back to you which funds will be used for that, and make sure that you're completely aware of where that is. We've just started the process on that.
Any further questions? Okay, again, thank you, Dr. Polio. Our next couple items are speakers wishing to address the board, of which there are none for agenda items and non-agenda items. So therefore, we'll move right on to our action items part of the agenda, of which we have two. The first one will be a recommendation for approval of the working budget for fiscal year 2017-18. I'll turn it over to Dr. Polio for an introduction.
Thank you. And Chief Financial Officer Cordelia Harden, John Colopy will come to the table. We did a work session on our 17-18 working budget at our last board meeting 2 weeks ago, and I think they laid out a lot of that budget. I know everyone has our new budget packet, which I want to commend Cordelia and John for their work on it. They really found and explored a better way to present our budget, and I think they've moved it forward, worked through committees, and I just want to thank you for your work on that. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Harden.
All right, thank you. Most of this information you've heard before, so I don't want to be redundant, but at any time you have any questions, certainly stop me. But through this first presentation, I'll go through pretty quickly, again, because most of it all of it you've seen because it was included, but we also discussed it at the work session. But we have added some additional slides at the end that some board members had asked for some additional information, so we'll go over those also. So the first part is, again, what you've seen. It's the board actions that have taken, and this is just a reminder to tell you everything that you have done, which started back in January for this current year budget. However, for the 18-19 budget, you actually began your input back in August. So this is a new process that we're working through, and then coming October 10th, you're going to be looking at priorities again for the 18-19 budget. This evening, we're asking for your approval for the working budget for 17-18, and then we would, assuming that it is approved, we will forward it right after this, tomorrow. It will be forwarded to KDE for their approval, which by law is required to be up there by the end of the month. This is our total revenue. It's $1.56 billion, $1.2 billion of it being general fund. All the other areas that are listed are categorical, which means they have specific criteria and a specific use, where the general fund, as it says with its title, can be used for various items, all with educational purpose, though. This is just to show where our breakdown is as far as local, state, and federal funding. This is the details more of the general fund. The state paid benefits up in the top left-hand corner is our health, life, and KTRS contributions that the state provides to the employees of the district. All of our grants are actually required to pick up their fringe cost within the grant program itself. You saw this before. This is our budgeted revenue, the changes that occurred between the tentative budget and the working budget. And this is the expense side, which does the same thing. It's just for information. Breakdown of our budget, we went through this last board meeting also. Here you see that our school allocations, $680 million of the general fund budget of $1.2 billion. And then the additional cost, showing that we have allocated all of the funds. This next one is our major budget expense items. Let me go back here. Our overhead and state paid benefits, that includes our gas, electric, insurance, water, sewage, those type of expenditures. District-wide school support, that 15% that you see there on the left, that includes like our preferred subs, new hire teachers that might be in there, musical instruments, science kits, those type of expenditures. So if you take the schools, it's 75% and then that 15%. So 90% of our budget, it can say it's going directly to the support of schools. This next is just a historical trend of the general fund major expense component categories. This is the historical 5-year by division. Some of the divisions, like if you look down at business services division, that actually includes finance, human resources, and internal audit. Some of the differences between years would be as a result of some reorganizations, as well as some cost increases, and then timing of some expenditures. This is also continuing with the historical expense by fund. This is the general fund actual working budget status, that $892 million that you see over to the side there. That is the current, what we consider the current year revenue. Then we have our expenses listed, which was the $909 million, but then we take from that our anticipated expense adjustments where we feel there's going to be like vacancy credit, so our net expenses being $898 million, which then says that we have a deficit at this point of almost $5 million, and that is not a concern because we have a contingency in order to handle that. Then on that $1.8 million that you see, that is one-time budget requests that are included in 17-18. So if everything remained the same for the budget for 18-19 as what we're presenting here, then we would be looking at 3.1 shortfall next year. Yes. And then our next ones. The next slides are the additional information that had been asked by some of the board members. This here is our future concerns. The current year, 16-17, what we're concerned about is the mid-year reductions that the governor has told all of the agencies that they may be cut up to 17%. At this time, I do not have details, so I don't know where they're going to impact, except they said they would not impact SEEK. So therefore, I've made the assumption that it will be against the grants, which in talking with KDE, they tell me that's where they will propose that the deduction comes. And so figuring it against all the state grants that we have come up with a total of $5.4 million that would be our 17%. Now, it could be more than that, it could be less. Again, I do not know enough details to tell you that that's all that it's going to be. I do know in talking with KDE today, and I understand they had I believe a video conference with the superintendents today. I don't know if Dr. Polio had the opportunity, but KDE was told they were supposed to come up with $69.5 million as far as their cut, but what they have proposed so far back to the governor is $22 million cut. So I don't know what the governor will say about that, but that is what they have come up with. The other concern we have is the CERS rate increase in the next year. I'm sorry, we've got our years wrong. Yeah, I'm sorry, we have our years wrong on both of those. So next year, we have been told that we should anticipate that the CERS, that's the Classified Retirement System, that we will have an increase in the employer rate. We're looking at anywhere from $15 to $18 million that will affect our budget next year. And then we have the possibility of some federal reductions in Title II, which is professional development, and the Carl Perkins, which is our voc tech that we deal with. Again, we do not know. Right now, Title II is $4 million, and Carl Perkins is $1.3 million. This next slide is our SEEK history. Those are actual dollars that we have received since 2003. If you look at the years in 9-10 and 10-11, those actually are the years that we received federal stabilization dollars. And so KDE offset and required us to put that into federal funds. So that's why you see that kind of reduction. If you were to add the stabilization funds to those numbers, then it's almost equal across, there's no gap in between. You really would not see a decline. It's very much, because the one year it's 24 million added to that, and the other is 21 million. In addition, the thing about this particular slide is the per pupil amount for the base allocation has increased except for the last 3 years, and it stayed at the $3,981 in SEEK, but yet you see that the amount we actually receive from the state continues to go down, and that is because of our assessments. It's the formula. The formula is made to work that way, and so if the legislature does not increase the per pupil the same rate, basically, as the assessments, then we're always going to receive less money from the state SEEK formula. This is a list of comparison of school districts by size and their budget. I'd like to point out JCPS is on the very top line. And then if you'll look down at Pinellas County, that district is very close to us as far as the number of the budget itself, as well as the number of employees is very close. But look at the number of learning centers. We have 167. They have 147. Students, there is a 2,000 difference there. So we need to really drill down even deeper into Pinellas and some of these others also, but at least gives us some counties that, other districts that we might want to look into and see how they're budgeting and what operations they have going. Now we also, on the next slide, John went through and also looked at how those learning centers break down as a comparison also. And that concludes our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Before we launch into questions from the board, I do want to provide a little bit more context on some of the, Ms. Gilpin, can you bring back that slide deck that Ms. Harden had, and go back to slide number 2, I believe, which is talking about future concerns. This past Friday, I'm on the board of directors for the Kentucky School Boards Association. We had a meeting and a discussion with this Commissioner of Education, and the Commissioner at that time talked about some of the challenges that his department is facing due to the, proposed $69.7 million or so of cuts that the governor had intended for that department. Just to put that in context, and I think this is the reason why the commissioner came back with $22 million worth of cuts, is because the Kentucky Department of Education's operating budget is $24 million per year. So that's about, several times their operating budget. I think it's also important that when we talk about funds that are coming through the Department of Education, we're not talking about that the money that comes through is just KDE money. It's actually, K through 12 money. So it's not just, KDE's money. I just want to put that in context. Some people think that's what it is. It's not. There's an allocation for us, but they do get some funds to be able to operate as an organization. So some of what the commissioner talked about was he's looking at limiting classroom impact. This is a reason why I think that his $22 million cut isn't as big or as complies with this $67 or $69 million request. He's trying to keep the maximum flow of funds through to boards and superintendents, and also trying to limit the impact on contract employees. Now, I'm not talking contract employees as in like people you contract with. I'm talking about like folks, like teachers that have a contract with their districts. And he's also looking at a way to mitigate the impact on some districts that are really in dire straits. And what I mean by that is that there are some districts out there that do not have funds. We're talking county district. We're not talking, independent districts, but do not have funds really last until the end of the year. Their fund balance, for as much as we get some criticism for it, isn't even a recommended, I think, auditor's recommendation of how much you should have in fund balance. We do have the required, I know it's 2%, but then it's 5% is what they recommend.
Yes.
So, and we are over that, but we're nowhere near I keep putting 17% or 14%. You know that.
Right now, we're around 16%,
Okay.
which equates to about 2 months as far as operating expenses and for cash flow.
And I thought there was a standard that auditors always use, and I can't recall that
And that's
percentage.
the 2 months operating, actually.
Okay, so we
yes.
are at the standard.
Mhm.
Okay, good. But there are some districts out there that are, because of, especially in the eastern part of the state, because co-severance taxes aren't what they thought they would be. So they're looking at some really hard decisions that they're having to make, and the KDE is a part of that process, trying to help them out. The commissioner talked about the things that he's trying to do. Part of that $22 million is cutting about 30 positions within the Department of Education. Now, these are positions, not necessarily people, so there are some positions that are open, but I'm sure that there are some people attached to that. And he's also talking about ending some programs, such as the CITS, the SITS program, which has always been a little wonky anyway, as well as he did mention that there will be some Title II cuts. And I know that that's the reason I asked to bring this back up, because you said possible federal reductions, and he's actually saying, yeah, there's probably going to be some Title II cuts. So we should probably prepare for that. And I just want to provide a little bit more context on that based on the conversation I had with him on Friday. I do know that there was a webinar today where he talked about this in more in depth. I was at work and was unable to participate in that, but I think that, and I'm not sure if you had a chance or anybody in the district had a chance to review that. My understanding is it has been archived, and we can look at that later on. So I just want to provide some extra context for that before we move on into the questions. So with that being said, do any board members have any questions regarding our working budget? Member Cole.
This question is probably more looking toward next year rather than what we're voting on tonight, but with the school allocation standards, I think we've had some very preliminary discussion amongst ourselves about looking at that, how we make those allocation standards. Can we switch it up to make sure that resources are maybe getting to some of our needier kids? So if I made my notes correctly, so we set that in January, is that right?
That's
so
correct.
if we want to then have a discussion about that, we would need to do that in like November or December. Is that right? I'm asking, I guess, my fellow board members as much as you, but you're the expert, so I'll start with you.
So what we have proposed is 2 work sessions that will deal with budget for 18-19. So I believe one's in October and one's in November. So one of them, or part of both of them, we want to finalize our budget priorities, but also probably the second one in November, we want to bring some numbers that would you to reflect on and make that decision. So definitely by Thanksgiving, you'll have that information.
Okay, cool.
And just to further tag onto that, those items are listed in our board calendar that's on our agenda. So we have those already scheduled.
Thank you for pointing out that I did do my homework right.
No, there's a lot on there. I'm not trying to imply that. I just want to say
I'm just kidding. I'm just giving you a hard time. And then just in general, I just have kind of some general thoughts I want to toss out there about the budget. Again, not kind of related to anything particular to this, but as was pointed out, I really appreciated the introduction in this document. I thought that did a really good job of, laying out in a very pragmatic, realistic way some of the things that we're going to have to face up to without, being overly alarmist. And, the fact is we've got a rapidly increasing population of English learners. We have very high numbers of homeless kids, students with special needs, children in poverty. In the new accountability system, as we just heard, we're going to be under a mandate to reduce gaps, as we should be. And meanwhile, however, Kentucky is 3rd worst in the country in cuts to public education since the recession. State funding has declined about 13% on a per student basis. You know, we're going to have to face up to the challenge of charter schools that are going to have potentially some negative effects on the budget. And then we're facing this prospect of these cuts that you just mentioned, the 17%, and then the retirement system things as well. So, you know, I just want to say to, I guess, my colleagues more than anybody that, and the public at large, that I think, you know, it's our duty to really start rapidly finding some ways to find some more money for our public school kids. You know, I don't think any of us got on the board so we could sit idly by while politicians in Frankfurt and other places kind of slowly starve some of the neediest kids that are in the state of the resources that they need and deserve to have a fair shot. So, you know, I think the time is, if not right now, then very close to now. And all sources of local funding, I think, have to be on the table, including, you know, some potentially quote-unquote sacred cows. And if Frankfurt's going to shortchange this, I mean, it's up to us to begin acting with much more urgency and acting much more aggressively to advocate for our families.
All right. Thank you, Member Kolb. Are there any other questions? Member Porter. Should be toward. There you go. Nope. Okay. Here. Here. Use that one.
Okay, my question has to do with career and tech education and the potential of decreasing CTE funding. So, am I working? Okay. If that is to happen, I mean, everything is kind of, we don't know, how will that impact the academies that we're working so hard to build?
Obviously, the academies of Louisville are a priority for this board and the school district. And so we would have to look into the general fund. Priorities would have to be made. In some cases, fund balance would be used in order to take care of any shortfall. But as Dr. Kolb mentioned, we're going to have to look at revenue generators as well as cost-cutting measures, and the general fund would have to take care of those cuts.
Okay, just quickly to follow up with that, and I understand that we're going to have to find dollars. We do have money in fund balance, but we cannot cover all of that. And I think that as we as a district have an opportunity to receive funds from other funding sources, some sources that are just coming to Kentucky in the last couple of years that are supporting education, that it's good for us to embrace those opportunities and to hope to increase those opportunities to support the students of the district, because we do have some funding sources coming into us now, and perhaps to look at the ability to increase how we can get additional dollars for programs that relate to the academic performance and the social, mental, all that supports our students. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I think also our grant writers, we have a great grant writing team with resource development under Dr. Dina Dawson's shop. And I think they're going to have to look even harder and help us through this also, just whatever grants might be out there, to see if they can help get additional funding in.
Okay, well, I'll speak specifically to the William E. Keenan Foundation, who has just come to Kentucky as of last year. They are currently supporting some of the programs within JCPS. So as those programs come to the board and we embrace those programs, we want to embrace them so that we have the potential of increasing the funding dollars, because it impacts our students. That's just one that I can think of quickly. Thank you.
Further questions? Member Horn.
I've got those. I think it's on.
It is.
I'm really encouraged by all the hard work that the finance team, Cordelia, John, Bo, all these people put into this work, Dina's team, the collaboration with planning department with Florence, to really not only make the document a lot better and helps me understand it, also just detailing it out with the schools is really important, because that's where for me, that's where it is. And so I can see how the school level folds up into the budget. It's a work in progress, just like the continual improvement model that I know that our board started 3 years ago when Lisa and I got on the board, and we're rolling the new programs into it. And it's an exciting thing to see this all evolve. I think that it is a better process, and I'm very excited about it. I hope that, we adopted a financial planning calendar that sets out the dates and the times that we do things. And if we need to modify that calendar, we can do that. But it's good to know what's coming. And back this time, I guess it's maybe 2 months from now, we asked schools last year to put together, their, recommendations for things that they needed. One of the new ideas that was introduced was, after we passed the initial round of budgeting, we went back and pulled out that list, and Cordelia had committed to looking at that list again as new requests came in. And so I hope that that will still be honored. We cannot, there are some restrictions, aren't there, on use of fund balance? Can you use fund balance for, what can you use fund balance for?
You can use, as long as it has an educational purpose, then fund balance can be used for that. Now, we have to be careful, because it is like your personal savings account. Once it is gone, it's there. So we do not like to tie recurring expenses to fund balance. So, such as adding a position, we typically prefer not to do that unless we know that there's other funding available, or it's going to be able to be absorbed into the next year. But one-time expenditures, let's say it's to buy a software program or to Chromebooks, that type of thing, then that is what the fund balance is for, and then these emergencies that come up with budget cuts also.
Right, and it's like this time of the year we can see kind of where we are with last year's budget. We can see what we have in the contingency. So it's not that we can't use our contingency. We just have to, first of all, make sure that if we're going to open up new requests, that they also get compared to the current requests that are still on the table that were not granted. And then, go through the logic of if it's a one-time request, and then also just to fold it again into the continual improvement process to make sure that it aligns with these 3 strategies or 3 pillars. Dr. Polio's pillars align beautifully with the current board's 3 main ideas in our strategic plan. So the 3 things that Dr. Polio has mentioned go throughout our funding cycle, and all of the funds are tied from the school level all the way up. It's like knitting a sweater. It's all kind of woven in there. It's just really important that we review our plan, make sure that we're expressing it in the way that we can understand it at the school level. I'm thrilled with how it's going, to see that it's being received at the school level in this way, and then to take the budget items, if we're going to open it up again, it's exciting. It could be really beneficial to the school. I just want to make sure there's the accountability that it still gets into the continual improvement process.
Well, and regarding the requests that were made last year that did not get funded, typically what schools will do when we start the new process, some of the schools have already found other methods of funding. So we don't want to just assume that all of the previous requests need to be brought in. That's why we ask the schools to then look at it again, talk with their assistant superintendents, and if they still have a need, then this is the time that they would submit those requests.
Vice Chair Wellman.
Thank you for the presentation and for the new format. It really provides so much additional information about all the cost centers, and I know that was a tremendous amount of work, but it makes it much more transparent, and there's a lot to dive into, so thank you both. I just want to mention that last Friday I was able to attend, I guess it's like a subcommittee of the Finance Committee that was taking a look at the lessons learned document. And it was a really robust conversation. I thought you were both there. And I thought it was a really terrific conversation. I want to give a shout out to a couple of community volunteers, Angie Morin and Chris Harmer, and there were several others there who, but Angie and Chris I know put a lot of time into reviewing the lessons learned document, really dug in some good conversation. And what I thought was, and this is something that Steph has talked about as well, what was really important was that we were seeing the various strands kind of coming together, so it wasn't just finance in its own silo. There was finance, there was strategy. Are we funding the right things? Are we funding the things that we say are our priorities? And are we using data to inform what we continue to fund and what we don't? So I think as Steph said as well, I think it remains a work in progress, but I'm really encouraged about the work that's happening. I'm encouraged about the breaking down of silos, and I feel like being able to make good data-informed decisions, particularly in these very lean times where there may be tough decisions ahead, is so important. So I just want to commend all the folks for coming together, Dina's shop, people talking about the strategy piece and finance, obviously. I thought it was really helpful and very encouraging.
Thank you.
Member Horn?
I'm sorry to talk again, but the lesson learned committee met and gave the feedback from reading the document that Bo Yan and Dina's shop had, Florence, and they had produced. And so we had that meeting, and now I have that feedback in one document. So we're going to take it to our finance committee in the next meeting, and then we'll put together at that time a recommendation for the board. And the hope is that our finance committee in our October meeting would approve that. And so then that recommendation could go to the board, potentially in October, or if it wasn't, we didn't have time in that meeting, we could bring that recommendation to the board in the November meeting. So we're shooting as a goal to get it to the board, a recommendation for the continual improvement process by the November, so we're not going to try to rush it, but it'll probably be at the, look at the agenda planning calendar for November.
Any other comments on our budget? All right. Thank you once again, to echo Vice Chair Wilner's thanks and gratitude for putting all this together. Dr. Polio, have anything further to add?
No, just thanks again. Great presentation and great organization of the materials.
Okay, thank you. All right, so is there a vote to approve the working budget for fiscal year 17-18? Vote, motion made by Member Horn. Is there a second? Second made by Member Porter. All those in favor? Motion passes. Now we are on to our next action item. This next action item is a recommendation for approval of request for proposals, and it says public relations and community relations services. It's mostly community relations services. And this is something that, let me be the one that presents this. Since the board feels that community feedback is important, and the superintendent search RFPs that we received earlier didn't adequately address this point, we are putting that part of our superintendent search process on hold. Doesn't mean we're not going to do it, it just means it's on hold temporarily. What we're going to do is we're going to move ahead with the search by accepting an RFP to gather community feedback. And it is our hope to receive proposals from organizations who really understand Louisville and can ensure that all segments of our community are given the opportunity to provide feedback as to what qualities they're looking for in a leader of our school district. While this process is occurring, the Superintendent Screening Committee will meet once all members have been selected. Presently, teacher and classified representatives have yet to be chosen, but they should be selected here soon. Additionally, the district will also post for the position of a superintendent, or for the superintendent's position, in a variety of media to start gathering resumes. And all of these updates will be posted on our district superintendent's page on the JCPS website. So I want to kind of give you some context behind why we're looking at a community feedback and community relations RFP. And at this time, is there any discussion regarding that item? Member Kolb.
Just in general, and I know I don't think I'm telling my colleagues anything that they don't agree with, but I'm really feeling an urgency to move the process along. You know, we've got a lot of challenges that we're facing, and it's not exactly fair for an acting superintendent, I think, to have to try to face those challenges with the title of acting superintendent. So whether the permanent superintendent is Dr. Polio or someone else, you know, I think we need to move forward as quickly as is possible while still making sure we do our due diligence. And so teachers and classified staff elect your representatives is an important step for the screening committee.
Member Geese.
I'd like to agree with and echo my colleague, Dr. Chris Kolb's comments. I do, again, feel the sense of urgency. He makes an excellent point about the term acting, and I look forward to seeing how this board moves forward in that process. I'm also glad to see a preference for people who understand our community, as Louisville is a very unique and diverse community. I feel like who knows us better than the people who we call our neighbors and our friends.
Thank you. Member Porter?
I would like to know if you could briefly, or if our general counsel could briefly talk about what the process is, because all of us are beginning to hear, we get emails, but we're also beginning to have conversations with people that say, just go on to the top, to go to the decision. And I think that although we're posting information on the website for people to look at, that perhaps they are not reviewing that, and it would be helpful, since we are in an open meeting and this is recorded, if you, our General Counsel, Frank Mellon, could talk about what we must do according to the state guidelines, because as I continue to say, we have to follow the rules, and that's what we must do and what we will do. So if we could maybe just briefly review those so everyone could hear it and it becomes recorded at this session, I think it may be helpful, or if I'm the only one that thinks so, then you all can overrule me, please.
No, I'll be happy to tell you that. Since your question can be one or two parts, depending on the way you look at it, let me start with what's required by state law. And to do that, I'll turn it over to our legal counsel, Frank Mellon. I think we all have an idea of what's required by law, but he's the expert on law, so I'll let him go through that process.
Yes, and what is required by state law is that a screening committee needs to be appointed. It's a somewhat cumbersome process to put it together. The screening committee is composed of 2 teachers who are elected by the teachers in the district. That election is overseen by JCTA. I've been told by Brent McKim that they expect to have those 2 teachers by the end of September. I don't believe Brent is here tonight, so, or is he? No. I will check again with Brent, but he had promised those teachers by the end of September. The screening committee also includes 1 board member who has been appointed, that's Chair Brady, 1 principal elected by the principals, and we do have that name. 1 parent elected by the presidents of the parent-teacher organizations. We have that person. And then, as Chair Brady mentioned, 1 classified employee. That has been a bit slower than I would have hoped because we have so many groups in the district. We have AFSCME, we have SEIU, we have plant operators, we have Teamsters, we have JCASA, and we are finally pulling that list together, and we hope to have that election conducted soon. It will be conducted online by the classified employees. And I will have to add one caveat. If all of those elections and appointments do not result in the committee having a minority member, the statute says that one minority parent member must be elected by the parents of the district in an election conducted by the board. So we will have to see whether the classified employees or the teachers produce a minority member, because so far we don't have one. That is what the statute requires, and that's all the statute requires in terms of a search and a screen. We have, at the board's direction, a project manager who is an employee at our law firm, a paralegal, who is working with me on the election process for the classified employees. We are beginning to put together advertisement that will be put in Education Week, the national education newspaper. We are putting together an informational brochure that will go out to the various national organizations. There are, as you know, national organizations for school superintendents, for minority educators, both black educators and Latino educators, and so on, and we will let those organizations know that we are looking, and we will collect resumes, and we hope that by the time the screening committee is put together and begins its process, we will have some resumes for them, and of course those resumes will also go to the board members. So that, in a nutshell, is the process that we intend to go through. And then, as Chair Brady mentioned, when the firm is selected with the RFP that's been proposed to you tonight, that firm will go right to work and seek community input and report to the board on what the community is looking for in a superintendent. So that is what we have in mind at the moment.
And just so I might be able to ask a question relating to minority representation on the screening committee, if minority representation isn't selected by the two organizations that we have yet to hear from, and it would be minority representation or minority parent, would that possibly go through the PTA, or would that have to be, as state statute says, a separate election that the board has to do?
The statute says an election conducted by the board. To my knowledge, that type of election has never been held in this district because there's always been, I think, a minority representative through the normal selection process.
Okay. All right. So we'll cross that bridge if we have to come to it.
Right.
All right. And also to tag on to part of that, regarding, just again, there's a fair question to be asked. We have a very talented and capable communication staff. Why couldn't they go out and gather community input? They certainly can. They're more than capable of doing that. However, we're trying to keep this process as independent as possible and not within the district itself. I don't want there to be any misperceptions that there's an inside job or anything along those lines. That's why we're looking at a different firm, preferably a firm that really understands the dynamics of our community here in Louisville, Kentucky. So does that answer some of your questions? Okay. All right, cool. So anyone else have any other concerns or comments? All right. Hearing none, is there a vote to approve, or there's a motion to approve the RFP for Public Relations and Community Relations Services? Motion made by Member Gee, seconded by Vice Chair Wilner. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Now we are on, thank you, we are now on to consent items. So we'll go to our, there are no information items, by the way. We are now on to our consent calendar. At this time, I do know of one item, item N.2, that has been requested to be pulled down. Do board members have any other items? Member Geese?
Item D.
Item D. Okay. Any other items?
I just have
Member Kolb?
a quick question about item C that I'd like to discuss briefly.
Okay.
When we, yeah, so.
Let's do that as an independent item, and then we'll just make things a little bit cleaner. All right. Anything else? All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items C, D, and N.2? Motion made by Member Horn. Is there a second? Second made by Member Geese. All those in favor? Motion passes. Now we're on to our first consent item that has been pulled down, which is item C, the recommendation for approval of job descriptions. Member Kolb, you asked for this item to be brought down.
Yeah, and I apologize for not bringing this up earlier, and if nobody else thinks this is an issue, then I'm happy to move on with it. But with the job title for Director of School Choice and looking at the job description, when I put those two together, I was just wondering if it might not be better to have a different title for the job, since this job relates specifically to charters, you know, and we already offer a very wide array of choice, and you know, choice has become a buzzword in the charter movement that is not always entirely representative of the reality. So it's just, and again, I apologize, this thought didn't occur to me sooner, and like I said, if nobody else thinks this is an issue, then I'll gladly vote to approve, but I just wanted to throw it out there and see if anybody had any similar feelings.
I'll comment and then open the floor for Cabinet and staff struggled for the better part of a month with the name. So we really did go back and forth and have 4 or 5 different iterations of what a title should be. We didn't want to box the position into just being about charter schools and have the ability to expand it. We thought of some other school ideas that have come before us, that has come before this board in the past and continues to come, that might not be charters, they could be, they might not be, that we feel that this office might be the one that would explore those, bring back recommendations to the board also on those. So at this time, the really digging deep into the charter school regs and bringing them back to you is what we want this to be. But we really didn't want to make just the position about that and have the ability to expand it too.
And that makes sense. I guess that falls under the scope of responsibilities, other projects and initiatives as directed by the superintendent. Yeah, I just worry about especially if this person is going to be focused on that for the foreseeable future. I worry about it conflating, you know, but I'll shut up about it now.
I can certainly understand your viewpoint on that. I think that, you know, just to reinforce what Dr. Polio is saying here, in that this isn't just about, you know, charters, but it, you know, rather than calling the position, you know, Director of Charter Schools, we also want to try and be inclusive within the organization as well for whatever decision the board might make. So, you know, at the end of the day, we're still going to be one organization. We're still going to be serving our students. So I think that's one of the reasons why we went with, you know, this case, Director of Choice, which in our case actually means choice. So that's, you know, so we're really trying to be true to that definition. Any other comments? Member Horn.
The only other thing I was thinking about with this title was just, it doesn't have anything to do with this position, but it just makes me think of the magnet schools and their role within JCPS. They're so important to my district. We have so many people in District 3 that attend magnet schools. So I just, I don't think that they fall within the school choice. Is that right?
At this time, no, they would not. That would stay the way it is right now. We did also contact Kentucky Department of Education, the new charter school director up there, to get some feedback. We do want to work in collaboration with them on the name. I know it's a minor thing, but just like you said, we struggled with it too. So at this time, no, that person would not be in there. to do that type of work.
And the reason I raise this is because I know in our strategic plan, we mentioned school choice. And so I wanna try to just remind, we might wanna revisit, that part of our strategic plan as we should be in a continual strategic planning process, in addition to, like Dr. Polio, your 3 things that potentially are phrased a lot clearer for school level. Since this is adding like an actual position and it is referenced in our strategic plan, we might need to like revisit that section of the plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyone else? Okay. Is there a motion to approve consent item C? Motion made by Member Porter, seconded by Member Kolb. All those in favor? Motion passes. All right, next on our agenda will be discussion regarding item D, which is a recommendation for approval of organizational charts. Member Geese, I believe you pulled this down.
I pulled it down for a simple reason, and that was just to highlight something that we were speaking of earlier when we were speaking of budget. If we take a look at the few changes to the organizational chart that were recommended by Acting Superintendent Marty Polio, we take a look down at the bottom at the tagline here that says the net total savings for all org chart changes submitted is $72,707. So as we talk about being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, having to find money in difficult times, I wanted to highlight that as a pertinent example of how this board is able to do that under effective leadership.
All right. Thank you, Member Geese. Is there any other discussion regarding this item? All right. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve consent item D, recommendation for approval of organizational charts? Motion made by Member Geese. Is there a second? Second made by Vice Chair Wilner. All those in favor? Motion passes. Now we're on to our last consent item. This is consent item N.2, the acceptance of Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Education Grant from the Kentucky Department of Education. Member Kolb, I believe you brought this down.
I did, and thank you for letting me do it. I just wanted to raise a few points about homelessness both in the district and in the city as a whole, and housing insecurity and how it affects education. So the beginning of this memorandum of agreement states that the Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Education Funds are awarded on a competitive basis to school districts to assure that all homeless children and youth have equal access to the same free, appropriate public education provided to other children. The MOA goes on to stipulate that districts shall remove barriers that hinder enrollment of homeless students. That's all fantastic, but the grant is for $110,000, which I'm very happy to have, but there are officially about 61 homeless kids in our schools, but for many reasons, and several of those reasons are outlined in the executive summary of the budget that we just passed. For many reasons, that's almost surely a pretty severe undercount, and page 11 of that executive summary mentions many of those reasons specifically. So of course this $110,000 isn't all that we spend on homeless children, but it's really pretty much a pipe dream to think that we can accomplish the goals set on in the grant with the situation as it currently is. So we just heard recently about a report on chronic absenteeism in schools throughout Kentucky. One of the chief reasons that happens is unstable housing, and kids with unstable housing are often the ones that frequently switch schools, which is disruptive to their education, but also their classmates and their teachers, because teachers in these classes have to spend more time reviewing material and going over behavior expectations again. And is it 250 students every day in JCPS switch schools? Is that right, Dr. Polio?
It's 249, I believe.
Oh,
yeah, right there.
Good to be accurate, yes.
249
kids switch schools every day. I mean, that's a huge number, and that presents a lot of challenges, I know, for school staff and others throughout the district. So a few quick facts about homelessness in Louisville and housing insecurity. So according to the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there are over 21,000 families on the waiting list for public housing. So that's, well over 50,000 people probably. And our city needs almost 65,000 more affordable housing units. And according to the trust fund, 1/3 of workers in Louisville, about 218,000 people, so people with jobs, don't make enough money to afford family housing in our city. And even among those most in need who stay in emergency shelters, over half of those in emergency shelters have jobs. And the trust fund goes on to state that economic projections are that most of the jobs that will become available in Louisville in the next decade will not pay enough for families to afford housing and other basic expenses. So thankfully there are some strong voices on Louisville Metro Council, such as councilpersons Bill Hollander and David James and Jessica Green, among others, who have advocated for funds to build more homes for working people. And these folks have done just about all they can, but it's only a fraction of what's needed. So if we want to honestly fulfill the mandates that are set forth in this grant, and if we want to have any chance of succeeding on the new accountability standards that we just learned about, the fact is that Metro government has to step up and do a whole lot more for housing in our community. I mean, JCPS can spend all the money in the world to try to catch these kids up, but the reality is we're probably just not going to be able to. And JCPS can't build homes for kids, I don't think anyway. Although there's some legislators that probably think we do. So I would just encourage, and I would hope everybody that works for JCPS, that supports JCPS, and my fellow board members would take every opportunity to encourage our Metro Council members and our mayor to put some serious funding behind the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is really ready and able to address the housing crisis, but just needs the funds to do it. There are over 600 trust funds throughout the country. The benefits that they bring to cities and school systems are very well documented in the research, including a fantastic return on investment. Trust funds leverage at minimum a 6-to-1 ratio in city investment and outside investment. So it's a real boon to the economy, in addition to being the right thing to do for our kids and allowing them to have a chance at success in our schools. So I just wanted to share that about this particular item, and I appreciate the time to do it.
A point of clarification, Member Kolb. Earlier, and I don't want to speak for you or presume to speak for you, but earlier I believe you mentioned that there were 61 homeless kids. I believe you meant to say 6,100.
Yes,
okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. I just didn't want to make that assumption, but I was jiving with the number that I
appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Porter, you had some comments? Is it working now?
Let's see. It is working. I would like to acknowledge the fact that this money is coming to us from the state to help us with our homeless population. But I would also like to underline the fact that the work of the homeless coordinator, or whatever her particular title is very extensive and intensive. And this money does not come close to compensating the work that this person does. And as we start talking about job responsibilities, I understand all that everyone has said, but at some point we need to be equitable and fair, and if it means that we're losing good people because they are not being compensated, and we are taking the money that we are getting and we're receiving that money, but also I think that we need to look at the work, the scope of work for the homeless person, and also we're going to do work with foster care. And as you talk about 6,100 people for homeless and the number of people that we have in foster care, I think that we need to look at the work responsibilities. And I know we're talking about what we don't have, but I don't think we can afford as a district to lose people that are devoted, passionate, qualified, and capable of doing their work. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. Is there a motion to approve consent item N.2, the acceptance of Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Education Grant for Kentucky Department of Education. Motion made by Vice Chair Wilner, second made by Member Kolb. All those in favor, motion passes. That concludes our consent calendar. We are now on to our board planning calendar. Is there any discussion regarding the board planning calendar? Member Horn.
I had the opportunity to go to the agenda setting meeting, and it was really interesting. I enjoyed it, and I wanted to thank the chair and the vice chair for having me there. And I just, again, just want to renew, I have done this occasionally, my concern that the board planning calendar doesn't have anything on it. Calendaring isn't a function, like this calendar is board planning, it's not a function of dates, like calendaring dates. So we don't need to have like the meeting dates, we need to have the ideas for the 3 areas of our strategic plan that we are overseeing as a board. The financial calendar is set, and so we don't need the meeting dates to put them in the month that they occur. So I would love, Dr. Polio, just to see the financial calendar make it onto the board planning calendar, and then to start the discussion, potentially maybe at the retreat or somewhere, wherever we can, to start the discussion of how we're going to oversee over time the 3 parts of the strategic plan.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Is there any other discussion? All right. I do have one item. It's been brought to my attention. The Say Yes to Education initiative and the Weiss Institute that this board had agreed to be partners with, along with the City of Louisville and some other important organizations within our community. We'll be having another convening in I think, was it Cambridge? On November 14th, which just happens to be the same time that we have a board meeting. A member, or Vice Chair Wilner has gone to this before and has expressed the fact that it's an important meeting, and it's usually a really good idea that we have someone from JCPS there, as well as the superintendent. Dr. Hargens, before she left, had attended a few of these, as well as some of the other cabinet members here. And there's been a concern and question raised as to whether or not there's any interest in trying to move our calendar or move that particular date so so JCPS can attend this particular event on the 14th. So I want to, since this is our board planning calendar time, I thought this might be the best time to actually talk about that and see if there would be any concerns or any questions or anything along those lines. And also ask Dr. Polio if there was any thought as to an alternate date. I don't know, I may be putting him on the spot on this, but I wanted to ask any board members first if they had any concerns. Member Geese.
So long as it's later in the evening, that would be my only concern. Do you think it could be as simple as having that meeting on the Monday or later in the week? Is that what you're suggesting?
The recommendation, there's 3 weeks between October 24th and November 14th. So if the board wants to approve that, we would move just the November 14th to the November 7th. So there would be 3 weeks between November 7th and November 28th instead of between October 24th and November 14th. So it would remain on a Tuesday. We would just move that 14 date in November up to 7.
I was really hoping we could do it 4 or 3, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, kind of, help you with your schedule. No. Yeah, that's one of the ideas, and just move it up a week. Anyone else have a concern? All right. This is just open discussion. This isn't an action item. This isn't something, and then because we're in a special meeting, I can't call for a vote on it. But I did want to have this discussion, so we'll probably have this maybe as an action item to discuss at our next board meeting, provided, of course, there is no major issues. So, Member Cole.
We do have a policy committee meeting on November 7th at 4:30, but we could change that. Just.
what time did you say it was, you possibly, was it going to be the normal 7 o'clock time, or did you mention earlier?
On the 14th?
Oh, no,
Or
on
on
the
the
7th.
7th? No, it would be the same schedule as we always have.
So that may not be, well, I guess it could be if we have it at work session, so that's true. And
If you
and
could flip
Sunday.
that meeting to the 14th, maybe, that would help.
That's true, too. So, and at least currently on the planning calendar, we don't have a work session scheduled at this time. So, any other concerns, comments? All right, it's something we'll think about, and then if you see it on our next board meeting agenda, obviously we've had discussion about that, so I don't want to surprise anyone or spring anything on anyone. So, okay. Hearing no other issues, I assume, we'll move on from this. So do I have a vote to, or a motion to receive the planning calendar? Motion made by Member Kolb. Is there a second? Second made by Member Geese. All those in favor? And the motion passes. All right. Now we're up to board reports and discussion regarding board reports. Anyone? Member Porter.
We are going to have the first meeting of the Facilities Committee, and this is an organizational and planning meeting, but also Dr. Polio has some information that he wants to bring to the Facilities Committee, and the notice will go out tomorrow, thanks to Sharon. And I wanted to give the date and the time and the location. We hope to, on this particular meeting, we will meet on Wednesday, October the 4th. It will be at Van Hoos in the Stewart Auditorium from 4 to 5 p.m. And I believe that Dr. Polio has a meeting prior to that, so that's why we picked the 4 to 5, and that's why we picked the Stewart Auditorium at Van Hoos. It's an organizational meeting, and I'm saying that because we have not absolutely said that we want to meet on Wednesday, so we will get the feedback from those that will be attending the meeting on that day, nor have we determined that 4 to 5 o'clock is the most appropriate time for everyone to get there. So it's an organizational meeting plus information that will be shared by Dr. Polio. Again, the date is Wednesday, October the 4th, Van Hoos, Stewart Auditorium, 4 to 5 p.m. The next item I would like to share is this morning at 9:30, I was at Englehart Elementary School. Today was tie, T-I-E day, not as in food, but tie as what you wear around your neck. And we had many volunteers from the community to work with our 4th and 5th grade young men at Englehart. And one of the speakers today was a former graduate of Englehart, and the kids always sit up and listen when it's somebody that's been there before them. And this person happens to be Delquan Dorsey, so I want to give him a shout out. He works in diversity, equity, and poverty. Also, Aldwin Helton spoke to the young men this morning, and it was just really encouraging to see them learn how to tie a tie. And now on Tuesdays, they are to wear ties to school every day with their polo shirts or whatever. But it was quite a worthwhile experience. So I wanted to give a shout out to Englehart, Dr. Ryan McCoy, who will say to you, this is not my work, it's the work of my team. And truly it was a team effort, the first time they've attempted to do that, but it was a job well done. Also on Sunday, I want to thank Wave TV for coming to Chickasaw Park. They were there to take back the streets, and Don G. and staff, including the general manager, the news director, and many people of staff from Wave TV were there, and I was there with Delquan Dorsey with a table for JCPS. So once again, thank you, JCPS, for being at Chickasaw Park. From 2 to 5, it was only 90 degrees, but it was a great day, and lots of young people and parents and grandparents were there. Saturday at Canaan Church was the beginning of the opportunity to talk about the out-of-school program for the Sons of Issachar, which is the males that will be participating in the Du Bois Academy, and other males. and the 5 churches that will be aligned to give after-school services and weekend services to the students. That was at Canaan Church on Saturday. The churches that are currently signed up to work with that are Canaan, Bates, Burnett Avenue, Elam, and First Gethsemane. And Commissioner Pruitt came to talk with everyone there to give encouragement. And also we had an opportunity to see Principal Gunn, who got permission from his professor at Bellarmine to be there on Saturday. So just wanted to share that opportunity that was made available. And each of the sites will have their own kickoff, but this was all the sites in the room at one time in the event that anyone had any questions. So that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I
Member Horn. Oh,
just
sorry.
check the date on the Facilities Committee? I want to make sure. Did you have the 11th or the 4th? We had down the 11th, so I think we sent out, but
No,
is that,
we haven't sent anything out.
so you want the 4th?
I don't know. Just let me
Okay.
check.
That's fine, no problem. I mean, I think we can make either one work, so we'll get together and officially send out a date.
There's going to be a meeting soon.
Yep.
We'll send out the notice.
All right. Member Horn.
I wanted to thank Mary Hurst for hosting a group from JCPS. There's some others in the room here that we had our portrait done by one of the students, and we also sat with some students and we were interviewed, and it was wonderful to see that partnership with the art instructor Marai really bringing out the best in those very fragile and special children at Maryhurst. I'm honored to have that in District 3. It's a great school. We're doing really good work there with our JCPS school. I attended Focus Louisville, so I got to hear Dr. Polio one more time. And what was really exciting was that when we went and traveled to the schools, Dr. Polio had tasked us all with asking everybody pretty much, like, what are the 3 things that you're working on? And you didn't really have to ask, but at all 3 of the schools, everybody reported out that they said the 3 things, that we were going to improve climate and culture, increase student learning, and improve operational efficiency. So those were the 3 things, and it was really great to hear it affirmed and really getting into the schools, and really people were trying to do that. And in that meeting, I was able to go to Seneca. I had not visited Seneca High School. It is dynamic. It is exciting what's happening at Seneca. I was just blown away by the principal and by the students. That there was a student that I thought he was a teacher. He was amazing, and the other students were amazing. They had chickens, which is a little odd. They had all kinds of animals and stuff. It was really surprising. I was really surprised. I also attended a JCPS. It's not a school, but we do have children in it. It's called VIPS, and it was a visually impaired preschool, and it was, if you get a chance to visit that, it is life-changing for the preschool students that attend that school, because if visually impaired child isn't stimulated with appropriate opportunities when they're a preschool student, their life challenges are much greater. And so the success of that preschool is just amazing. I was not able to attend Saturday school, the kickoff, but I was represented. I love that District 3 really just steps up and they represent me even if I can't be there. And so Amy Frederick from Christ Church is our volunteer, and she is going to be participating in Saturday school, and we're going to be doing what needs to be done. We will serve. But that's Amy Frederick from Christ Church United Methodist. So, but again, I'm just really thankful to have everybody here today in hosting at Norton Commons Elementary, District 3.
Member Geese.
I had a few opportunities over the last few weeks that I think really highlight the dedication of our teachers in the classroom. It's almost like a caught being good situation when I'm out and about at different community events or different organizations of which I'm a part, to see our JCPS teachers, as well as several Van Hoos Education Center employees stepping up to the plate and assuming a great deal of leadership throughout the state. I made reference earlier to an organization of which I serve as vice president, the Kentucky Council for the Social Studies. We held our annual conference at the old state capitol and the Kentucky Historical Society in Frankfort approximately 2 weeks ago. And this is all volunteer driven. It's got a 20-year history of serving as the voice for advocacy for Kentucky social studies in the classroom. It being a strictly volunteer event, 5 members of our board of directors are all JCPS Van Hoos Education Center employees who are spending their weekends, their evenings, volunteering their talents, and doing good for their profession, both on the clock and off the clock, which I think is very deserving of praise. In addition to that, we also had our annual elections where we received a new steering committee, several of which elected to serve on the steering committee are JCPS social studies teachers, of which I was very happy to see. In addition to that, I also had the opportunity last week to attend at the University of Louisville. We had a very prominent speaker in town last week. Associate Justice to the United States Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch, was in town. It was wonderful to be able to attend that, but even more wonderful to look out into the audience and see several JCPS history teachers, government teachers, English teachers, all sorts of teachers who have taken their one coveted personal day of the year to attend that for professional development that I'm sure they did not receive credit for per se, but they were able to have their questions about their content clarified by a sitting Supreme Court justice. So how cool is that? So I just want to give a shout out to those folks who are making it work for themselves, their content area, their students, and the profession that they love and care about both on the clock and off the clock.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Warner.
I'll just highlight 3 community events that I attended over the past couple of weeks. 2 of them was an opportunity to hear Dr. Polio speak about his priorities with members of the community. One of them was at the, oh, help me out, staff, the League of Cities, Jefferson County League of Cities. I have only 3 of the small cities in the district that I represent, and but it was great to have mayors and Metro Council, or not Metro, small city council members from all over the county there, and to hear about the great work happening in our public schools and the priorities that the board has set, and that Dr. Polio has done such a good job of translating into school language. So that was great. Another opportunity with Dr. Polio, I was at the Voice of Louisville in West Louisville and meeting with community members there. It was another great opportunity for folks to hear about the work happening and some of the priorities of the district. And then I also had the opportunity for the 2nd year in a row to be on hand at the Louisville Pride Festival in the JCPS booth, along with lots of JCPS employees, administrators, teachers, families. Dr. Kolb was there as well. Very rewarding to be there. Last year was the first year that JCPS had a presence in the festival, and there was such a sense of like happy surprise that we were there. And what was so lovely this year is that people weren't surprised. It's like, of course we're there. So that felt like progress, and that was terrific.
Member Kolb.
And tagging on to that, Principal Jack Jacobs of Bloom did a lot of work for that, and they had this bowl of Skittles there, and I think I ate about 500 Skittles while I was working. So, I had on last Monday, I had the opportunity to participate alongside Dr. Polio. I'm getting tired of seeing you in public, by the way. So, I had an opportunity to participate alongside Dr. Polio on a panel discussion about the pension system. And in preparation for that discussion, I looked into some specifics of the pension system, and there's just kind of a few findings that I'd like to share, and maybe you all know this already, but it was news to me. So first, it's true that in the long term there are issues with our pensions that need addressing. But if you look at the facts, specifically in the PFM report that Frankfurt had done, the facts simply do not support the claim that the pension system is in imminent crisis. For starters, yeah, it's true that we can't continue underfunding our pensions at the state level, but the question isn't whether the pensions are fully funded now, you know, because not everybody's going to retire now. The question is whether or not the pension liabilities are manageable. And to say that our pension system is in imminent crisis is kind of like saying that you're at imminent risk of defaulting on your mortgage because you can't pay the whole thing back right now. So of course that's not how a mortgage works, and that's not how a pension works either. I suspect that a successful business person like Governor Bevin is aware of this, so it's kind of confusing why the message doesn't align with what I'm sure he knows. Second, at the heart of this crisis mentality is a conclusion by PFM, the outside firm, that our pensions, according to them, can only expect a 6% return on investment. That's a severe adjustment downwards from what we had been anticipating. So throughout the entire country, only 8% of all pension plans use an estimate lower than 7%, and none of them use an assumption as low as 6%. So while it's true that due to the Great Recession, 10-year rates of return on pensions are just under 5%, but last year, for instance, the rate of return for KRS was over 13%, and the rate of return for KRS since its inception is over 9%. So again, it's kind of a mystery how PFM arrived at this 6% projection when there's really no solid evidence or logic to support that projection. And then third, finally, PFM, one thing they're very critical of Kentucky about is our practice of assuming payroll growth and hence pension contributions as a percentage of payroll will also grow along with that. So instead, what we use is a level percentage approach. PFM says that we should rely on a level dollar approach, assuming that the payroll of public sector employees will essentially decline over time as pension payouts increase. But again, there's no empirical basis for this claim, and in fact, the Conference of Consulting Actuaries says that what Kentucky currently does is a model approach, and the Legislative Research Commission found that 41 out of 50 states do what Kentucky currently does. So my understanding is PFM really rate Kentucky over the coals for that, but it's the way that you're supposed to do it. So to give just one particular example of how off-base PFM's criticism is, PFM even assumes a level dollar approach with TRS. So this means that they're assuming that teacher payroll will not increase or grow over the next 30 years, and that we will fail to add any new teachers and fail to pay them what we do now, even as the student population increases. So I think just a moment of reflection tells you that this is simply a fantasy that does not have any basis in reality. So, you know, I'll refrain from any further public speculation about why it seems pretty clear based on the facts that Governor Bevin is misrepresenting the state of the pension system. However, one thing that we can be sure of is that the facts do not support the claim that we must take drastic action now. It is true that in the long term the state cannot continue to habitually underfund the pension system, but that's a completely separate issue from the course of action for which Governor Bevin seems to be advocating.
All right, I think everyone said and given an opportunity. Is there any other discussion?
Can I correct the date, please?
Oh, yeah, sure. Member Porter.
The correct date for the Facilities Committee is Wednesday, October the 11th. That's Wednesday, October the 11th. For the third time, Wednesday, October the 11th. My apologies. I keep my own calendar, so I apologize. I'm not perfect, but it's Wednesday, October the 11th at 4 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and be brief. I've got a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, I did have the opportunity to travel with our Director of Strategy, Jonathan Lowe, up to Buffalo, New York a couple weeks ago to participate in the Weiss Institute convening that they had up there. And the purpose of this event was to see what Say Yes has done in Buffalo districts, or schools, Buffalo's school district. And there's also some other school districts there that are considering that program. I believe Waco, Texas was there. There's a place in Denver that was there, and we had Newark, I believe, was there. So we had some other cities that were looking at this this process. And I found some things that were really interesting. We had a really good group. We had some folks from the nonprofit side and philanthropic side of our community, as well as the city of Louisville. Sent a couple representatives, and there was a representative there from 55K. And we had some really good discussions regarding what the focus was going to be, or how we can get the focus, I guess, really aligned on what we need to do in Louisville, because we have a different dynamic than most of the other cities, and the fact that we're a larger size. And there's also some other issues regarding funding for higher education at play. But it was interesting to see how some of the folks that Buffalo had been able to bring to the table to have this partnership. And it isn't just a partnership between the city of Buffalo and a school district. It goes much deeper than that. It has many different representatives throughout the community represented at the table, not the least of which was a parent who was an activist, and back at the way they introduced him was by showing a YouTube video of him back in, I believe, the late 90s, where he was trying to lead a boycott against the public school system. He was at the table and one of their biggest supporters now. So I think that if you can bring those types of folks that had really never been at the table before and talking to each other and bring them along, and now you're operating together as one cohesive community to giving scholarship opportunities to every kid within that district. Now that's going to work for Buffalo. It may not work for us. We're talking about that still. But to have those types of things, and it wasn't just that. There were a lot of wraparound services. There were some parent centers in each of their schools there. And it was interesting because the more I looked at this, I realized that in many ways, JCPS already has a really good infrastructure set up for this already. And the fact that we already have Friskies. We've had Friskies for years, decades really. That's not something that type of concept was what their family centers were there, but we've had them for a long, long time. We also had, really good relations, I feel, with our parent organizations. They had, in Buffalo at the time, many different individual parent organizations where they were kind of popping up, and they would pop up for a particular issue and they would go away. And some of them were more systemic, and more permanent, but they sat outside of the PTA. We really don't think I have that dynamic here within Jefferson County, at least not to a large degree. And the interesting thing about it was that they were able to form they called it a parent congress. And the way to do that was to have basically all these different points of views come together and work with the PTA and have a common voice, a common goal, and speak with one voice. And also, that was a go-to representation that the district could make sure that they get parental input from. I found that interesting. I didn't really see that we had the potential of doing something like that here, and just my idea and bouncing this off of having something between our Frisky board elected representatives, because these folks in Buffalo are elected, but having Friskies and also having the elected PTA representatives. So perhaps something like that, but that's just talk at this point. There's no plans involved or anything, but just I found it interesting that a successful implementation of that program in a fairly large city had brought a lot of folks to the table. And they showed a lot of other mobile healthcare, had a mobile healthcare unit that was at one of the high schools there, a high school that didn't look that dissimilar from any of our high schools, especially in age, because it was almost 100 years old. But it just, and we have these mobile units as well at our high schools from time to time. So I think we have a lot of good foundational work already done for us. We just need to come together and bring everybody else along. So that was a great opportunity and a great trip to be on, however brief it was. I was basically there to Buffalo and turn around and come right back. I also attended, as I mentioned earlier, last Friday, the Kentucky School Boards Association Board of Directors meeting with conversation with the commissioner, as well as Saturday when we had the full board meeting. Lots of great input, lots of different points of views as far as finding out what other districts throughout the state are facing, especially in regards to the proposed budget cuts that I mentioned earlier. So just put that out there. And also want to mention later on that Friday evening, I want to say thank you to Dr. Polio for coming out to Fern Creek's homecoming, and also to Joey Bailey and the Fern Creek Alumni Association, who for years have done really great work with that school and providing lots of opportunities to those kids. And finally, I want to thank the members of the Metropolitan Louisville Women's Political Caucus. They had a meeting yesterday regarding charter schools and how Kentucky was going to deal with that. Had the opportunity to sit on a panel with Alan Young from JCTA, who seems to be at every single panel that I've turned around. He's on a panel. He's always there. But and also I got to meet Earl Sims, who is Kentucky Department of Education's new director of charter schools. So and also a Manual graduate. And even though someone had mentioned the fact that I'm a Western grad, I will mention that he's a Murray Racer grad. So if he's listening, then I'm sure hopefully he appreciates that. So, but that was a really good discussion that we had, and it was interesting to see some of those viewpoints expressed. So that's what I've been up to in the last 2 weeks, and I appreciate everyone else sharing their reports too. That, I believe, ends our board reports. There's no executive session that's needed. There's no action item regarding that is also needed. And finally, before I ask for a vote to adjourn, I do want to finally mention one more time, thank you to Principal Videoto for hosting us today here at Norton Commons Elementary, and to the staff, thank you very much. And again, thanks to all the parents and students that came out here, especially the students who shared their talents and their knowledge with us. With that being said, I'm going to ask Member Horn if she would like to, since this is your district, if you would like to make a motion to adjourn. Can you say it one more time?
Move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Member Porter. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.